Welcome to our Sound for Video session. It is the 23rd of November 2016, and we have just a couple questions, so let's jump right in. First of all, it's from Tony Burns, who says, "Hey Curtis, I'm on a rapid track learning all things post-production right now, and I'm very interested to see how you organize projects for your YouTube videos on the file system and in Premiere. I'm starting to come up with my own organizational structure, and one of the big decisions I have to make is whether to use the whole directory structure and a separate Premiere project for each episode of my channel, or whether to organize one big directory structure and project for each series. I'd love to see how you do it." Okay, Tony, good question. This is somewhat sound related, more kind of overall video related. I will confess, I actually have, I do edit sometimes in Premiere, but I'm primarily a Final Cut Pro editor. But let me show you some things, first of all, at the file system level. And we'll talk to a few things here. So here, for example, I have a directory. What I've got here is I do all of my footage when it's at least the stuff that's kind of active projects resides on a 4-disc RAID array that's external to my computer. So I'm on a Mac. It's a Thunderbolt 2 RAID array. It's really fast, so it works well, especially for 4K. So I have a directory on there, and then within there, I have all of my active projects. Here, for example, I'm working on my Zoom F4 review. And you can see here, within that folder, I have a variety of other folders. And I actually have, before I start each new project, I have this project template folder. So let me talk through that one a little bit here. So here at the bottom, I've got the raw audio and raw footage folders. Those are empty right now. I've got a Final Cut Pro project template. And actually, if you open this, it's got the bumpers and the intro and outro music in it and all that sort of stuff already. So I don't have to do that every single time. So that's a nice thing. I've got a Premiere Pro project as well for when I do edit in Premiere Pro. Same thing there. I've got it set up with a template so that it's got the intro and outro, bumper and music and all that business. I then have 2 additional folders, footage and audio. So here, let me just show you here, for example, in the Zoom F4 review folder that I'm working on right now, you can see I've already have some raw audio clips in here. So the way I do this is once I've shot, I come back and download everything here. And I put all of the audio in the raw audio folder, all of the footage from the camera in the raw footage folder. Here, for example, we just got some tests here, some noise tests with the Zoom F4. And on raw footage, I just shot some additional clips last night here. Just make sure I've got the right thing. Yep, sure enough. Doing a temperature test. We put it out in the freezing garage for a while and then check to see how it did here. So I'm going to go ahead and drag these 2 clips into the raw footage folder. And it's going to copy those. One of the things that I do on the file system that I kind of got in the habit of doing this when I was shooting in Premiere Pro is I have kind of a numbering scheme that I use. And typically I've got sort of my main storyline footage, and that's going to be the talking head things and on the YouTube videos at least. It would be a similar type thing for my corporate videos where it's kind of the interview or the talking head that's usually kind of the main storyline in the pieces that I work on. And then I also have B-roll on top of that. So what I typically do, and you can see here with these audio clips were actually recorded without any picture. So they're really just sort of, they're noise tests really is what they are. And I may or may not use those in my final piece, but I needed to do them for the testing that I was doing for the review. But if I do use them in the piece, what I do is I typically start numbering anything that's going to be B-roll or potentially or not used in the actual piece at 50. And these are usually for shorter pieces. If you're going to do longer pieces with a lot more clips, you probably want to go with a 3-number numbering scheme. But here, for example, these 2, these are B-roll here. So I would just go ahead and rename these. These are actually going to be B-roll. So the audio clips, I don't have any corresponding picture, so I'm going to start numbering these at 60. So this is going to be 60. This is really going to be the screen test, the screen freezing test. Having a hard time typing today. And of course, when lots of people are watching, you always make a lot more mistakes typing. Okay, and then the same thing here, this is going to be 61, screen freezing test. So we're doing some temperature tests, see how well this device holds up under extreme temperatures. So that's what I would do with my B-roll, as I would number it, starting at 60 or whatever numbering scheme works for you. Again, you could go to 3 numbers. When I pull in the primary line, usually that's going to consist of maybe 5 or 10 clips total. And in those cases, I will just number those starting at 0, 1. The reason I do all that is that once you get those into Premiere, they'll stay in order better, and you'll know where all your different footage is. So that just makes it easier to manage once you get it into Premiere. And then any corresponding audio that matches up with the audio or with the picture clips, the video clips, I number them the same way. So for example, the 0, 1, main storyline, that clip will go in here, and the corresponding audio clip from the audio recorder will be 0, 1 main in here as well. Then what I typically do is for short pieces, I almost always do the color grading and the audio processing up front. And I do that before I even start cutting. In longer pieces, that doesn't make sense because you're going to pick and choose which pieces or which clips you're going to actually finish. And so if you have 1,000 clips, it doesn't make sense to finish all of them, both in terms of color grading and audio processing, dialogue tracks I'm talking about, if you know you're not going to use all of them, because it can take a lot of time. But if for the pieces you know you're going to use, I would process those at this point. So the audio clips that I'm going to use, I would take those into Audition, do the cleaning, and then save them into the audio folder up here. So that way I can just kind of keep track of what are the raw audio files versus the finished audio files. Do the same thing for footage. And sometimes also if I use timecode for that particular shoot, I may actually do the color grading and the audio processing first, and then I'll sync them using the Tentacle Sync Studio here. What I'll do is just drag those clips once they've been finished into here, click the sync map button, and they will line up and they'll be all set to go. Then you just either export them as a media file or as an XML, and you're ready to take them into either Final Cut or Premiere Pro. So that's how I lay things out in the overall directory structure on the computer. Then I'll show you again. I know you were talking about Premiere. I'm actually more of a Final Cut person or editor these days. Use Premiere when I can. But I think the big question you were asking is, should you have like one big project with all the separate episodes in different folders, or should you have a separate project for each YouTube episode? So that really depends on how you want to do it. I do it both ways depending on what's going on. So for example, here is a corporate piece. We have people who are not professional actors who are laughing at themselves because they keep messing up. But this particular piece was a series of videos that were all kind of organized around a theme and all shot in a similar period of time, like over the course of 3 or 4 days. And in this case, I decided to keep them all in a single project. And instead of folders within Final Cut, they have a different concept called, what are they called again? They're called events. So a similar type thing. So I had a separate event, or you could do in Premiere a separate folder for each of the different pieces. Now, for my YouTube videos, I typically don't do that. You could, but I generally don't. There are good reasons to do it that way, though. It makes it easier to share clips across episodes if you need to do that. So that's one thing to consider. It makes it easier to find them a little bit. So there are reasons to do it together. The problem is, of course, once it gets to a certain size, it starts to get pretty unwieldy. So there's always this trade-off. A lot of times, for example, here was another piece that was more of a corporate narrative video piece. And in this case, I just had its own separate project. And you can see there are not too many clips. It wasn't too bad. Or was it? Yeah, these are all the clips. So there's not actually that many assets, so it was actually pretty straightforward. I wasn't sure how big it was going to be in the end. It turns out it was a relatively short piece in the end, and putting it all in one project probably wasn't strictly necessary, but again, it's a judgment call, I guess is what I'm saying, and it's up to you. So there are some thoughts there on organizing your footage. I'm not here to suggest that my method is perfect. It's something that works for me. I would probably do it a little differently if I were working on longer form pieces on a regular basis. But for short pieces where you have a relatively limited number of clips, this is what I do. I should say this also, even if you are in a situation, I can show you, here's here's all the folders on the hard drive for that project I showed you, where I had all of the different events within a single project. I actually organized them into folders as well. So they're all in the same main folder, but then all the raw footage, raw audio footage, and audio folders are organized into their own subfolders as well. So just some thoughts there. Hope that's helpful for you. And if you've got any follow-up questions, would love to hear them, and I'll happy to share my perspective on those. All right, next one, Matt Gray. Hello, Curtis. There's a question I'm struggling with. I'm wondering how the Rode Stereo VideoMic Pro compares to simply using a Zoom H1 or H6 XY mics. What might I be gaining in quality if I added a Stereo VideoMic Pro for indoor choir or band recording when I cannot plug into a soundboard? I think the main thing you'd be gaining, it's a trade-off. I will say this. I have a Zoom H1. I've used the Zoom H6. I have a Stereo VideoMic Pro. I have recorded indoor bands, actually just recently. My daughter plays trumpet and she plays in a band. So I actually use the Stereo VideoMic Pro. I think the main kind of advantage with the Stereo VideoMic Pro, depending on the type of piece you're doing, if you can feed that directly into your camera, that just makes the syncing in post easier. In terms of audio quality, Stereo VideoMic Pro versus the Zoom H1 or H6, I don't notice a huge difference between those three. So I'm not sure you would really get a whole lot in terms of audio quality difference with the Stereo VideoMic Pro. I guess the few things you get with the Stereo VideoMic Pro. Number one, the new one has the Rycote Lyre suspension system. So if you do bump the camera, it's less likely you're going to pick that up. So that's good. It also feeds directly into the camera. So if you don't want to mess with syncing in post, then that can be helpful for you as well. Is there an audio quality sacrifice there? It's hard to say. For my daughter sings, I just use the Stereo VideoMic Pro directly into my camera and call it good. The rooms usually that they're playing in are rough enough that having I don't know. Yeah, you could certainly get better microphones and potentially get a better recording, but there's so much going on in those rooms anyway that's not great for audio typically, that I don't know if it really makes that much of a difference. That's my personal take on it. But I don't really think there's a huge difference between the Zoom H1, H6 and the Stereo VideoMic Pro stereo mics. So if you've already got one of those, I would just roll with it. Some people would say, well, you can feed the audio directly from an H1 or an H6 into your camera as well. Yeah, you could. I never found that to work all that great with the H1, but it can work. So I guess it's just up to you. In short, I don't think there's a huge difference. So if you've got one of those devices already, just go with it. If there's something about it that really annoys you and you want to try something else, Stereo VideoMic Pro I think works pretty nicely. I use it with my Panasonic GH4. It's how I record my daughter's performances, and I'm pretty happy with it. So I would just say this, Matt, don't expect any major difference in terms of audio quality between any of those three. That for recording a band or an indoor choir. I just don't see that much of a difference. So, all right. Hope that was helpful as well. That was all the questions we got this week. So we're going to go ahead and probably end this a little bit early. I hope everyone's having a good time out there making some really awesome recordings, and we'll talk to you again next week.